bills, or we've had a couple of bills sponsored to do this, because we think that it needs to be taught. There's a lot of things that are taught in schools, but the only thing they read about labor unions is that there was a strike and 100 people were killed. And we need to change that perception, because as I said earlier, we do a lot of good for the community, not just for our members, but for the community.
Are you in a situation where, in a way, you have to run at top speed just to stay in place?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, we're constantly fighting the battle of losing jobs, trying to replace those jobs. We continue to try to organize, for example, in the trucking industry, because we know that's an industry that's going to be here, that they can't move that to Mexico. So we try to organize in that industry, the warehouses and things like that. But in the other industries, like some of the factories, it's very difficult, because as Mr. Goldstein said earlier, those people are worried that their jobs are going to be moved to Mexico or wherever.
Right, so there's always that threat.
It's always there, and I can understand that.
Now, if you, I talked to a union person who said, you know, I'm ashamed of corporate America. Do you have that kind of feeling?
Well, you know, there's a lot of people at loggerheads with what corporate America thinks about these days, but I think we need to get away from that philosophy, because whether we're ashamed of them or not, they don't care. You know, I mean, let's face it, it's a bottom line economy, and what profits are what counts. But there's a lot of issues that we can work on together, that we can sit at the bargaining table, we can fight about, but there's some major issues that are out there in this country today that are going to cause this country big economic problems if we don't sit at the same table and work them out. And one of those issues that a lot of people don't want to talk about is health care.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on in health care today is eroding the wages and the benefits of all Americans, not just union members, everybody, because the costs are rising so dramatically and so quickly that it's impacting wages.
Right, so you have a situation where a union, because the health care, just to cover their health care, you can't really take care of wage increases because health care wipes out everything.
Exactly, but see, it's not just affecting the union members. I have a lot of friends that have businesses that are not union, and it's affecting them dramatically. That's why we need to, that's one of the issues, that we need to sit down collectively and we need to talk about this issue, because believe me, everybody's concerned with what happened on 9/11, and so am I. But I can tell you that domestically, this issue is at the top of the list.
Now, there has been some discussion about this in the context of the state of Wisconsin. Is this something that you or local labor leaders have tried to engage in discussion with Milwaukee or Wisconsin leadership?
We have talked about it. We've talked to politicians about it, but nobody seems to have the answer. It's a topic that a lot of politicians are very much afraid of, because it is a hot button issue. But we need to stop talking about it. We need to do something about it. We need to stop pointing fingers at different healthcare groups and hospital groups and providers, and we need to sit down and collectively do something about this thing, because believe me, this is the issue out there today.
Now, you heard Bob Milborn talk about, sort of rating local union leaders and talking about
Sure.
that they're very progressive these days and so on, and easier to work with. Turning the tables, how would you rate, the business leaders in Milwaukee?
Well, I think the business community in Milwaukee has been very receptive in a lot of areas, particularly with some of the other union leaders. I think John hit the nail on the head that we talk a lot more these days than we did years ago, and I feel very strongly about that. But the problem is, I don't know if they take us as serious as they should be. They look at these numbers and they say, well, what are we worried about? These guys are down to 13%, or they're down to 12%. Well, we may very well be, but we're not always going to be there. We're gonna come back. Organized labor is going to come back.
Do you see certain kinds of segments of the workers that you think are fertile areas to organize?
Well, again, the transportation industry, I think, is fertile for a big turnaround. We went through deregulation in the trucking industry in the early 80s, and that, I think, is fertile ground for us. That's gonna come back around. a lot of people talk about the service sector, you know, and while we're a general local and we do attempt to organize in that sector, we're more into the area of warehousing and transportation, and I think there's a real need for organizing there because of the safety of trucks and what goes on in the trucking industry, and how that industry provides goods to the public.
So if you had to leave one quick message for young people about unions with the little time we have left, what might that be?
Well, I think I would wish that the young people would try to learn a little bit more about unions. I think if they asked the question, if they went to talk to union leaders, I've always had my door open to students or anybody that wants to talk to me. I haven't been invited to a high school for a number of years now, and I used to be invited all the time. Even colleges. I would relish at the thought of going and doing things like that, because we need to educate the young people.
Well, Frank, thanks very much for joining us
Okay,
today.
Bruce.